Okay, so I think we've given sufficient time and attention to the previous halacha about when you can and cannot use the article of somebody else without their permission. Certainly, we said for a mitzvah, there's greater justification to borrow someone's item without their knowledge. Um, but even there's a lot of gray area, especially in a world today where people are more particular about their possessions. So we'll leave it there, and we're going to go on to the next sif, unless there are any additional questions or comments. Okay, so let's go to Chavches, which is going to talk about the issue of using inanimate objects that were left for your safekeeping. When are you allowed to use them, and when are you not allowed to use them or benefit from them? So Chavches, the Rav Shulchan Aruch writes as follows: Kishem sha'aser lihishtamesh ba'aveda upikadon litzarcho, just like it's usher to use a lost object or something that was left with you for safekeeping for your own needs. Remember, we saw that even a scroll that you received for safekeeping or that you found, you can only open it up and use it for its own needs, not primarily for your needs. So kach hamotze ma'os be'inyan shechayev lahachzir. Similarly, if you find money in such a way where there's a siman on the money, let's say it's found and tied up or something like that, or in a wallet, and you would have to return it, asr lahalvosam la'atzmo velo la'acher. You're not allowed to lend yourself the money, right, while you're waiting for the owner to come, and you're not allowed to lend it to another person. V'kein im hufkedu etzlo, and similarly, if it was given to you for safekeeping. So before we go any further, I just wanted to look, this is a very long sif. I wanted us to look at Kufya Dalid, where the Imrei Yaakov tells us that we're dealing specifically with inanimate objects, that there's no effort for you to store them in your possession, in your home, for example. So asr lahalvosam la'atzmo, so that's the reason why you're not allowed to make use of them, because you're not expending any resources to hold on to them and to watch them. V'davka bazeh shelo torach bahem. So it's only when it comes to money and other inanimate objects where you're not exerting any resources or effort to watch them. So there we say that you have no right to use them for yourself. But if you find a lost object where you are required to expend effort, you found Fluffy, right? And you realize that this dog is lost, or it's being pursued by coyotes or whatever it is, and you want to save it. So you bring it into your house and you contact the owner. The owner says, I'm in Florida. It's going to take me 2 weeks to get back. So I need you to watch Fluffy, and this is what the food that she eats, and this is the bath that you need to give her every other day, and so forth. And if you are watching the animal for longer than our sages required you to watch it, which we're going to see in a minute, because we haven't really seen that yet, and machro, and then you're allowed to sell the animal, right? So when it comes to Fluffy, you may not be allowed to sell Fluffy because the owner has a sentimental attachment to the animal. But if it comes to another kind of animal, let's say a farm animal, where our sages give you permission to sell the animal after a certain amount of expenditure that you've placed upon the animal, you've invested. So then, bazer rashai liishtamish b'mos. Then, once you've sold the object that you have permission to sell, so then you are allowed to use that money. You will have to give the money at some point to the owner when the owner comes to retrieve the value of their animal. But at the same time, you are allowed to use the money. It's only when the original item was in self cash in a bag, let's say, and the owner said, "Here, I need you to watch these Krugerrands for me. Then you don't have a right to use them for your own purpose. But once you've taken care of an object and you have to sell it because it's perishable and so forth, so then you are allowed to use. Well, he says specifically when you've expended resources on the object. And I just wanted to show you, because I don't think we've seen it inside yet, that there's a whole section of Shulchan Aruch that talks about when you're allowed to sell an animal that you found. So we'll go to the to the Shulchan Aruch. Here we go. All right, and so does everyone see the Shulchan Aruch? Is it clear, or should I make the letters bigger?
It's clear.
Okay. All right. Matzah davar sheyesh bo ruach chayim. This is the laws of Aveda and Mitzia, of dealing with lost objects. If you find something that's an animal, that is a living creature, shaharehu tzarech laha achilo, and you therefore have to expend resources to feed the animal, im haya davar sha'osa va'ochel kagon para v'chamor, if it is an animal that is productive, but it also consumes, such as a cow or a donkey, so mitapel bahem yud beis chodesh miyom hamitzia. So you have to work with these animals and keep them in your possession for up to 12 months. V'sochran v'lokeach scharan u'ma'achilan. But you also are allowed to hire out the animal, meaning that you have a right to use, to rent out the donkey or the cow as a beast of burden, because that's what it's meant for, and you can use the proceeds to feed the animal. And v'imhaya secharo yoser al achilaso, harei hayeter liba'alim. And if the wages that you get for the rental of the animal exceeds the amount that you need to feed it and maintain it, so then you have to save all of that money for the owner. So when the owner comes to retrieve his animal, he may actually be very grateful, because not only did you watch his animal, but you've also made a tidy profit for him. V'chein hatarnagolet, if you find a chicken, now a live chicken, right? Mocher beitzehen u'ma'achilan kol shnei masar chodesh. So chickens lay eggs if it's a hen, and if you find that kind of bird, so you can sell the eggs, and you use the proceeds from the sale to feed the chicken, and the same thing. Mikan va'elach, but if it's after 12 months, and this is all rabbinic institution, as far as they said, what is expected of a person when they find a lost object. So, sham demehen olav, so then what you do is you get a valuation of the animal, and we said there's a machlokus whether you have to do this in Beis Din or not, but some poskim say that it has to be done with the sanction of Beis Din, so that there's like a record of how you did it, and v'harehim shelo, and then you're allowed to keep the chicken for yourself, v'shel ba'olim b'shutfus, and they belong to you and the owner in partnership, kidin kol hasham mechavero, just like anything that is valuated that belongs to your friend, and at some point you will let's see. Right, but this is all assuming that you are not losing money by keeping the animal in your possession. And as long as you're not losing money, so then you must keep the animal for up to 12 months, and it's exclusively the under the ownership of the owner. Afterwards, you then v'harehim shelo v'shel ba'olim b'shutfus kidin kol hasham mechavero, and then afterwards it belongs to the two of you together, You both co-own the animal. I'm not sure the mechanism of how that works. So the Sma says, Ayin biyordei simin kuf ayin zayin b'divrei hator v'hamachaber. Just take a quick look at that. What is that talking about? Kuf ayin zayin. That's the laws of Ribbis. I guess it's you do this in order to be able to join together with the fellow to make a profit, and you are allowed to share in the profits after 12 months. I think that's what it means. In other words, when the owner comes to retrieve the object after 12 months, you have to return the object to the owner, but you are allowed to keep anything that you do after 12 months. You're allowed to keep half the profits for yourself. That's what apparently he's saying. Okay, in Sif Gimel, he says Matzah Agalim Usiachim Shel Rei Mitapel Bahem Gimel Chadashim V'Shel Petem Lamed Yom. These are a different kind of animal. And these are calves and baby donkeys. You only have to deal with them for 3 months because they require additional labor. And Vishel Petem or Vishel Patam, which is another kind of animal. Let me just see. These are certain kinds of animals that need to be fed with great regularity. So he quotes the Rambam 13:16 that this is a certain kind of animal that is a calf or a youngling that requires additional amount of work. So I don't think we have to go into the detail, but then he says in the next sif, avazim v'tarnagolim zecharim mitapel behem shloshim yom, geese and male chickens, you only have to deal with them for 30 days, because again they're not being productive. In other words, all you're required to do is to feed them, and these animals are not really as productive. Let's say a hen or a cow, you can afford to keep holding on to them for an extended period of time because they pay for themselves. But these animals, the ones that come later, don't really pay for themselves. And ketanim biyoser b'chol davar shetipulam ruba mischaro mitapel gimel yomim. And if they're really young chicks, and it requires you to spend more time with them than what you can make from them, so then you're only required to work with them for 3 days. Mikan va'elach mochran beveistin. And then from that point onwards, you can sell them. V'yesh omrim de'in sarach beistin v'yacholushunu lekachtem bo'osan adamim. And as we saw, the Ramah says you don't need to even use a beistin. You can just sell them, and whatever the proceeds are, you just hold on to those proceeds for the owner. And so that's why he writes in Sif Chafei, Ma ya'aseh b'damim. When you sell an animal that you can no longer keep because it's no longer cost effective, what do you do with the proceeds? So yinasnu l'motzei, v'yesh lo reshus lehishtamesh bahem. So the finder can use them. He just has to mark down how much the amount was, and then the money can be used for his own needs. Lefichach im nemtzu chayav l'shalem, v'afal pisha lo nishtamesh bahem. And therefore, if the money gets lost, the person who sold the object still owes that amount to the person who lost the animal. Shekeben sheyesh lo reshus lishtamesh bahem, harehem etzlo kisheila. Because since the money can be considered yours temporarily, the finder, so then it's like it was lent to you, but you have to replace it no matter what happens to the money. right? But that's why he says, but that's only true if you sell the animal and then, you get the proceeds. But if you find money itself that has a siman, lo yishtamesh bahem, you cannot use it. And therefore, if the money gets stolen or lost, so then you're going to be exempt from having to replace it. Certainly, if a mishap occurs with the money, or if someone breaks into your house with a gun and they steal the money from you, so then you're not going to be held liable for replacing that money. So that's what I wanted to point out, is that when you sell an aveda that has become too expensive for you to hold on to it, so then the money really now belongs to you until the owner comes, and then you can just pay him out of your wallet whatever the amount was that you got for the item that was sold, right? But here what we're talking about is where someone leaves you with money for safekeeping, or you find a wallet with money in it. So then the Shulchan Aruch says you're not allowed to use that money at all. So so now let's go back to the Imrei Yaakov. Okay. Umikol makom. Im hufkedu eitzel shulchani ochen b'ni bistam, rashai lahutzian. But he says, if I professionally am a money changer or a storekeeper, and I have a cash register, and a guy goes over to me and he says, do me a favor, I have this cash and I don't know what to do with it because I need to travel and I don't want to leave it in my house and I don't want to travel with it. Would you mind watching it for me? And I tell him, sure. But he knows that I have a bank. That's what a shulchani is a money changer, right? So then, Rashai Lahotzia. So then it's implicit that when he gives me money to watch, he knows that since I deal with money all the time, I may end up using that money and giving him other money in exchange. Shekaven shahadavar yadua shedarkan shel shulchani v'chen bani lisava litain tamid b'ma'ot, because since it is implicit that a money changer and a storekeeper is constantly passing money back and forth, the tamid heim tzrichim lama'ot, and they are also they rely on money, having it in their tills all the time. And this guy who came to me asking me to watch his money did not tell me explicitly that he doesn't want me to use his cash. Then we can assume that he doesn't mind. It's not specifically these dollar bills or these coins that he wants to be returned to him, but he just needs someone to watch a certain amount of cash for safekeeping. And therefore it's like it's a loan, like he's loaning me money. He's giving me money so that that I can use for my own purposes. And and therefore whenever I want to use them I can. I just have to mark down how much he gave me. And when he comes back and he wants his money back, I'll give him his money. And so that's true. Ela imkein hifkidan chatumim o kshurim bekesh mishuneh. He says, but that's only true if he gave me money like a wad of bills. But let's say he put the money in a container, and the container now has a seal on it, or it has a lockbox, or something like that, or he ties it up in a certain way to indicate that he wants to keep it intact in the bag or in the container that he left it, that he gave it to me. He says, then I don't have a right to break the seal and to use the money for my own purposes. Because he's basically indicated that he doesn't want me to use the money. He just wants it to be kept for safekeeping wherever I keep the rest of my valuables. But he says, Va'achshav, and this is what I find fascinating, Va'achshav bizman hazeh she'ein lanu sadotu chramim. He says, nowadays, remember, he's writing this in the 18th century. We, the Jews in the diaspora, We don't own fields or vineyards. V'chol iskenu b'mekach u'memkar. And our entire commercial engagement in the marketplace is with buying and selling, is with cash. Harei stam kol adam dino kichen v'ni v'shulchani. Then every single Jew is assumed to have the status of a storekeeper and a money changer. In other words, think the merchant of Venice, right? In other words, every single Jew, because we don't own land, what he means to say is we're not permitted to own land, and because of governmental laws, then everyone, it's implicit that every Jew makes his money by dealing with what's called mizuman, which is cash. Because after all, everyone relies on cash for their parnasa. And therefore, if someone comes to me and says, please watch this money, and he doesn't make any stipulations, therefore, so then, if the owner didn't want me to use that money for my own purposes in the interim, he should have told me explicitly. But the fact that he leaves it with any Jew, the Jew does not have to be a money changer specifically, but any Jew nowadays, he says, in the 18th century, is considered to be someone who is reliant for his parnasa on cash. So therefore, if someone leaves you cash for safekeeping, you may always use that cash for whatever you need it for. Now, I'm thinking to myself, okay, that's in the 18th century. What about the 21st century? Someone leaves me a wad of bills. Now, in today's world of electronic trade, people are becoming less and less reliant on cash as dollar bills than ever before. And so it would seem to me that if someone leaves me a wad of bills and asks me to watch over them, then it could be that the halacha would not be like what the Rav Shulchan Aruch has said, because the standards have changed. Someone puts in a rubber band, let's say a few $1,000s, and says, look, I need someone to watch this for me. I'm traveling and I don't feel safe keeping it in my house. Would you watch this for me? So I would say that you can't assume that he's okay for you to spend it, because today there's an understanding that people generally, I don't remember the last time I actually used cash. To be honest with you, number one, I don't do the shopping most of the time, and that's not because I'm lazy, by the way. It's because my wife actually needs to get out of the house more than I do, so I let her do the shopping. But even when she goes to the market, it's very unusual for her to use cash. And that's why I probably have currency in my pocket that's years old, because it's very I'm trying to think. The only time I use cash, I think, is either to give tzedakah to a guy from out of town, or I don't know when else do people use cash nowadays? It's very rare. I guess maybe if you're going to someone's farm and you want to buy their apples or something, maybe you'd use cash. But it's very rare today to use cash. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that because it's rare to use cash today, I don't think you can make the assumption that if someone leaves cash with you for safekeeping, that they're okay for you to spend it. That may have been the case in the 18th century, but I don't think that's the case today. Okay, so he then concludes and he says, "Bamedvarim amurim b'ma'os." So everything that we've said up until now is when someone leaves you cash for safekeeping. Aval b'sha'ar chafetzim v'chayotze bahem. But when it comes to objects other than cash, someone says, I'm traveling, I'd like you to watch over my silver candlesticks, or any other object that's of value. Afal pisha kol min hu shaveh ve'ein bo hefresh klal. He says, let's say you can make the argument, a guy leaves 10 widgets with me, and widgets are readily available in the marketplace, and I could always replace this widget with another widget. And there's no difference between one widget and another. Nonetheless, asr lahutzio u'lashalim acher tachta. I still, as the person who's a shomer, who's watching over my friend's object, I don't have a right to use it for my own purposes, and say to myself, well, I'll just buy him another widget, right? Let's say a guy leaves a power tool in my possession. He says, would you mind watching this? Well, I can't say, well, I see the serial number, I see the model number, I see the brand. I'll use it for myself, and if anything happens to it, I can always buy him another one. So he says, Afal pisha ein hefresh klal bein zeh shahotzi lezeh shemishalim tachtav kemo b'mos. Even though arguably there's no difference between the replacement item and the original item he gave me, I'm still not allowed to use it. I'm not allowed to take it for myself. Lefi shekaven she'ein hadavar yadua le'amafgid shahanifgad tzarech lahotzi chayfetz zeh. He says, because since it's not self-apparent that the person that is watching it needs the item, and so therefore the owner, when he left it with me, doesn't implicitly know that I may want to use it for myself, and there was no stipulation made. Ein kan hochacha shenisratze lazeh. There's absolutely no proof that the owner would be okay with me using it. V'harei zeh shalom midas. And therefore it becomes, if I were to use it, I would be using it without the consent of the owner. And that's, what do we call that? B'sholeach yad b'fikadon. That's called using someone else's object that I was entrusted to watch for my own purposes. And the Torah expressly forbids that. Kishlichus yad hamura b'Torah, Eina almanas ligzol bilvad, ela afilo almanas l'shalim tachtav. He says, because when the Torah prohibits me from using something that was left with me for safekeeping, it's not only when my intention is to steal it. Even if my intention is to replace it, should it get damaged, the Torah still does not give me permission to use items that were that were entrusted to me to use it for my own purposes. Okay? So, therefore, under no circumstances would I be allowed to use an item that was either that I found or that was entrusted to me for safekeeping. Would I be allowed to use it for my own needs? Unless I get express permission from the owner of the object that he doesn't mind if I go ahead and use it. Okay? Questions, comments? There's much more for us to see, but we're in the middle of the halacha though, and we'll continue it in Yirtzeh Hashem on Monday. Okay? So everyone have a good Shabbos.